Welcome into a brand new edition of the 06010 ESPN Communications podcast. I'm your host, Alex Feuz, and we have a very special guest on today's episode, Kevin Negandhi, SportsCenter anchor and ESPN studio host, who will be hosting the NBA draft on ABC tonight. Kevin, walk us through what's your excitement level going into the NBA draft this year on ABC?
So this will be year number 4 on ABC, and I'm really looking forward to working with Stephen A. Smith again. We've done it the last 3 years, and then Bob Myers, because Bob Myers' perspective will be fascinating as a former GM and understanding. This is not a draft that's super sexy in the sense of we have a clear-cut number one in Victor Wembanyama, right? A year ago, that was fascinating. What we have is the idea of teams moving around. I think it's going to be an active night. And to me, this is a draft with the eye of the beholder because each team has a different need. Each team will have a different board. So I think we're going to be in for some surprises, some head turners, some like, whoa, and the reaction that we're going to get from Stephen A. Smith and Bob in that discussion of why did this team do this? What does this young man do for this team? I think is going to be great because there's a lot of unknowns in a draft like this, and I think that's what makes compelling reality TV and shine when it's we're talking about sports and it's the best reality TV, and we have no idea how things are going to continue to play out, especially after the first and second and third picks. Who's left on the board? Do we have somebody that's going to shock us coming in, or a team that's going to come in and try to make a trade? I can't wait for that.
How do you manage that? Like when you're the host and you don't know what to expect, how can you control that?
You can't. So you what you do is you ride the wave, right? You lean on your research. You lean on um, the conversations that are, I think, compelling to the ABC audience. Why did this team do this? What's the connection for this team? What does this player bring to the table? Feed off of the crowd, and you feed off the reaction of Stephen A. Smith, who's never shy with his emotions, and he'll tell you what he thinks immediately. And then Bob Myers, who gives us the voice of reason. Okay, what was the whole goal here? Why would they want to do something like this? How does this fit? So to me, it's making sure you're leaning on your research. And I shared this with my kids the other day because obviously, I'm in a stage with our kids who are 12, 10, and 7 on studying and being prepared for anything and everything. And that's what this is all about. You can't just say, yeah, we already know what the board's going to look like. It's now immediately, hey, okay, this player moves up. This is a huge surprise. What does that do now for the next player on the board? What does that do now for this team specifically? Why do they go after that? What you do is you ride the wave and you lean on your research.
When does that research begin for you?
um, it began, I would say, probably around September, where camps are starting to begin for college players. You also are fully aware of what draft boards look like with Jonathan Gavoni, who does a phenomenal job 12 months a year with ESPN and traveling around the country as well as going to Europe and Australia and seeing a lot of these prospects. And you're constantly getting updates. All right, where's this young man? How's this guy? Is he healthy? Where's he at here? Oh, this, what happened to the G League? So it really starts in September. And a perfect example of understanding that you've got to be in it from September is Reed Shepherd, Kentucky kid, freshman. No one expected him to have the rise that he had during the season. Came in as a legacy recruit. I think a lot of people thought he'd be in Lexington for 2, 3, 4 years, and then he explodes as a freshman because of his shooting numbers, his athleticism, and now we're talking potentially top 3 pick. So you're following him through the entire season. You're seeing some of these guys make that move in January and February where you're like, whoa, he's on this radar now. And he's not only are we talking about a first round pick, this is a lottery pick, So you can't just pick up out of nowhere and say, "Oh, okay, the season's over in April. Let's pick up." No, I think you follow it. For myself, I love it. I love the draft. I love college hoops. I love the NBA. So I'm in it from September on.
When do you kind of have a gut feeling, okay, this is where the draft is going to go? I know you said you don't really know what to expect, but is there a moment where you kind of set in once it begins, okay, this is where the conversation can go tonight?
Oh, Alex, that's a good question. I think the theme is tonight. The theme will be the modern NBA, right? You can win an NBA title, as we just saw with the Celtics, with two star forwards, right? Modern guys stretch the floor. The theme you will see, I think, for many of these prospects that are taken, can he defend? Can he play multiple positions? Can he shoot the three? That's the theme. To me, that is the way the NBA has been for the last couple of years. That's the way the NBA is going to continue to be. So for me, it's not so much, hey, I can assume this is going to be the next pick. For me, it's I can assume whoever the pick is, it's because they can do this specifically, right? They could switch off, they could defend, they could shoot the three. And then if there's a surprise player that cannot shoot the three, well, why would they go after this player if they cannot do some of the things that we are checking off the list, right? I think it's fascinating for a guy like Donovan Clingan, Zach Edey. I think if you look 20 years ago, Zach Edey would have been the number one pick in the draft, right? Without question. So where does he go? Where does he land fit wise? Donovan Clingan, fit wise. Who are the ideal teams specifically? And is there a team that's going to move up and say we want him because he's going to fit our team? We don't need a star right now. We need a positional guy that can play what he does defensively, and then we can figure things out because we already have stars, right? I'm fascinated with the Spurs because they're in win now mode. Victor Wembanyama, of course, we saw what he did in the past year. I think they're not in a rebuild. They're not going to be looking like, hey, we're going to take our time. I think they want to win now. What do they do with 4 and 8? Do they figure out the package picks, get a star? So I think those are the themes that I'm setting things like where does Reed Shepherd go and Kentucky guards and how they have Dillingham with Kentucky as well. He's got a very much a Ja Morant flash to him. Um, where's his fit specifically? I think those are the themes more than anything else. And you could say like the draft could begin at 1. The draft could begin at 3. And when I say that, do we take a turn? Is that a surprise, right? Where we go this way with the Rockets at 3. Do they hold that pick? Because they're also very young. Are they in win now mode? So this year is very unique compared to previous years. Previous years, you'll have projections and you'll have like these guys are probably top 6. We just don't know what order. You can't say that this year. You literally cannot say. And Alex, this is one of those drafts that the 8th pick in the draft 4 years from now could be the best player, and we'll all look back and say, "How come we didn't see that? That was the guy that was sitting there and he blossomed. How come we didn't understand that was the guy?" Very much like if you go back a decade ago with Giannis, right? Like no one saw it where the Bucks picked him and how he developed, but then now you look back and you're like, okay, all right, well, that was the difference in the draft, and that's how you define that specific draft.
How different is preparing for SportsCenter and preparing for the NBA draft? How different are those two things?
Completely different, and you're using a different part of your brain, right? Obviously, research plays a role, but in Sports Center, you're spending 3 minutes on a subject, and then you go from the NFL to the NBA to for example, tonight would be the NBA, but Tuesday would have been specifically Stanley Cup and what the Panthers just went through, right? And you spend 3-4 minutes and then you move on to the next subject. You may revisit that later in the show, but off the top, you're just sticking with that specific subject for 2 to 3 minutes. So it's like boom, 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 let's go. NBA draft is okay. We're going to look at this layer wise. Then we have the interview. Then we have the reaction. We have the breakdown of the player. Let's move on to the next pick, right? So I think it's a completely different approach. And SportsCenter also is you've already got video, you're talking to an analyst. Here, you're reacting to something live, like immediate, like, whoa, that happened. What does this now mean? You're also having extensive, long conversations. I'm sure we'll talk about the Lakers and JJ Redick. Bronny's name will come up later on, of course, with this draft and potentially the second round. How does it play out in day two on Thursday on ESPN? So, like, it's a completely different approach. But in the end, my job as a host is to inform the audience, to have fun, to react to the current live situation, and make sure I'm putting the people on the set with me in the right position, and that is always Stephen A. Smith and Bob Myers. Are they set up right? Am I asking the right questions? Am I making sure that I'm getting the best out of them? In a commercial break, they may say, hey, we want to talk about this. So my job is to bring that conversation out. Or we can have a show meeting and they're like, hey, we want to hit on this. I have to bring that out in a conversational way. So the audience is, I've always believed that the audience that's watching us is basically eavesdropping into our conversation. And we're just talking. My job is to make sure we bring out the points, and then the audience is rewarded by listening in the entire time.
Kevin, this is my favorite part of any interview I do. It's the Fuse Fast Five. It's five quick.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. What's the best advice someone at ESPN has given you over your career here at ESPN?
Best advice was from God rest in peace, Bud Morgan, who was a guy that would break down our videos. He was a teacher. They would fly him up from North Carolina, and I saw him early in my career at ESPN, and he always said, "Keep it simple." He's like, "If you can explain something in 10 words rather than 15, go 10 words. Keep everything simple, pause, go to the next thing. Keep everything simple, pause, go to the next thing." There's going to be moments where you're going to respond and react, but keep it simple more than anything else. And that has been a mantra. I remember early in my career at SportsCenter, I actually wrote a couple of his notes down on pieces of paper, and then God bless my wife, I would basically put it on doors and mirrors throughout our condo. So I would never forget it. And then I would see it and I'd remember it. And it was literally all over our house, from the bedroom to the bathroom to the basement to the back of the front door to the kitchen. It was everywhere. And Monica dealt with it. Monica, my wife, was in TV at the time as well, as a great local reporter and anchor. And she's like, okay, I get it. I know what we're trying to do. And I was like, it's just helping me program my brain. Just keep it simple. Sometimes we complicate things.
Number two, you've hosted the Special Olympics nearly 10 years. What does that involvement mean to you?
It is something I'm really, really proud of, to be associated with ESPN and the Special Olympics. Because in reality, Alex, I've always said this, we just want to be involved. I think it's a human nature. All we want is to be involved, accepted, and loved. And the Special Olympics gives that opportunity to so many people who are always, dismissed in recess at the park when they just want to play sports. We fell in love with sports because we can get involved in sports, right? And too often, many of these athletes who just want to be involved, they want to be associated with something because they love it for the passion, the teamwork, the camaraderie, the competitiveness. So we could showcase those stories. And when they go back after being on TV nationally, they are celebrities in their own town. They're recognized for representing their town the right way. And I just love that we could share those stories, and we could give so many people at home the chance to identify and feel comfortable with who they are, and feel accepted, because that's all we want. We just want to be accepted and loved. I really believe that is a common bond, no matter who we are, no matter where we're from, no matter our background. And I think Special Olympics gives that opportunity, and we could share those stories on a national level. It gives many of those athletes a great sense of pride, and the families. The families go through so much to make sure every single weekend they have opportunities, and they get rewarded this way, where they're cheered on when they get back home. So to me, to be able to be a part of that, it's one of the highlights of my career at ESPN.
Number three, if anyone doesn't know, you are a Philly lifer. You love every Philadelphia professional sports team. And Jason Kelce is joining ESPN. What would
Love
be
it.
advice you would give Jason Kelce now on this side of the sports industry?
Just be yourself, because that's the reason why the city fell in love with Jason. He understands people. He makes that immediate connection to people. He's organically himself in every way, whether it's his podcast, whether it's while he's mic'd up playing, when he was on the set doing interviews after a game. I think he's just going to be an absolute superstar because he's the real deal. He's genuine. He is, and he is. He's a transplant, of course, but he's one of us as a Philadelphian. I grew up in the suburbs. I have so many people reach out to me, and through the years, my time at ESPN. Thank you for representing us, right? And whenever Jason was on TV doing something, and I'd always feel like a sense of pride, like he's representing who we are by not being somebody else, by being Jason Kelce. Him and his wife Kylie, they are basically royalty in the Philadelphia region because they are who they are. They know who they are. They're not going to apologize for it. They're not going to try to be somebody else, even with the fame. Jason, my simple advice is continue to do what you're doing. Be yourself, and the entire country will fall in love with you as Philadelphia has.
If you could do a podcast with anyone in your phone, who are you choosing and why?
Whoa. That's a really, really good question. Um, I don't know. Uh, is this like one of those flexes that we have to now reveal who's on our phone? Because I don't know, because sometimes the super celebrity is not going to be as entertaining with a mic in front of them as they are behind the scenes, right? If I could do a podcast with anybody, to be honest, and this may be boring, I'd probably want to do the podcast because we did it briefly when we did college football, our college football podcast on ESPN. I had a blast doing it with Booger McFarland and Joey Galloway because we just had so much fun chopping it up, talking about a sport we love. But some of our conversations offline, I think, are hilarious, and they'd be great for public consumption. So uh, those are two guys that you could be yourself. I know that they will not be somebody else, and that we could just talk, and it gives the audience the chance to eavesdrop and hear what we think and how we go about our business.
Kevin, the last question for you. I would be remiss to not ask you about your suits and your choices around your fashion. Where did this grow? You've gone viral a few times now with your different suits you've worn on SportsCenter. How did this kind of grow into something special for you?
I don't know, because I wasn't a suit guy back in the day. And then I just started, like I fell in love with ties. I've got probably over 300 after paring them down. I like to pare them down seasonally and give them to family and friends. And I got over 300. And then I started falling in love with sports coats. And then it turned into like one of those, okay, I started watching certain people. Jay Harris and I would always talk about our suits. Booger McFarland and I always talk about our suits. We critique each other. I sent him actually a couple of choices the other day, and I was like, "What do you think? Like for draft night?" So it's one of those side hobby things that I absolutely love. I, Jim and Ken Ginn over at Rothman's that we deal with in New York, ESPN anchors. I go back and forth with them on certain styles. I'll see something I really like, and I'm like, I want to wear that about this. So it has just evolved over the last 10 to 15 years. Now, listen, loud suits are not always the win. I will always say a clean white shirt will always make the suit or the sports coat pop. You can't have all three. You can't have like a 10 on the tie, a 10 on the shirt, and a 10 on the jacket because that'll clash. You got to be smart about it, right? So to me, it's it's a lot of fun doing it. It's taking risks, but at the same time still being classy, not being distracting on TV. And then that rare little pop will, and you mentioned wearing a jacket that people recognize and it goes viral. It's funny. It turns into like a little bit of a game. It's like, okay, what do I need to do next? But I never outkick my coverage here. So when I say that, I never try to outdo myself in the sense of I've got to get something. I've got to. If you do that, then you're not going to be yourself. That's just not me, right? So I'd rather be um, I'd rather be one of those guys who's understated, who is always classy, but not afraid to take a risk every now and then, compared to everything and every day's a risk. And I think if you build that with the audience, then they will recognize that hey, it's not over the top. You know who's underrated too, Alex. I'll bring this an underrated dresser on our air. Michael Wilbon wears some really like phenomenal combos, and I'll just sit there and like, oh, that works. Oh, that looks really really good. But I also know Ryan Clark wears stuff that I love that I know I can't pull off. So yeah, I also know my boundaries here, and that's the key I think for anybody that's wearing really nice suits. Know your boundaries because if you go over the top, you're going to lose people in the audience.
Can you give us a hint of what you might be wearing on draft night?
No, I cannot because I'm still debating. I literally I have no idea. I don't want to mislead the public because like this feels like a last minute decision. I'm on the fence on a couple things, it, it you know it's one of those that I have been thinking about for literally 3 months, and I'm going to wait literally right before I have to leave the hotel to get in the shuttle to go to Barclays, and then not look back.
All right, so we'll be waiting for the pick. But Kevin, thanks so much for joining the podcast today. This was great. Good luck tonight, and thanks again for joining us.
Alex, thank you so much.